Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. My guest today is Dr. Rory O'Neill Schmitt, who's the first person to be featured twice on my YouTube channel because we already made a video with her about voodoo a few months ago. And today we will be talking about another book of hers, this one, which is called Navajo and Hopi Art in Arizona, which of course is about art by Native Americans in Arizona. Welcome back, Rory. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you so much, Leo. I'm happy to come back a third time. So second time's a charm is what we say in the United States. So thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we have a similar saying in Italian as well.
Oh, what is it in Italy? I have to learn.
Well, it sounds like non c'è due senza tre. That means that if you invite somebody for the second time, the third time comes by itself.
Oh, okay.
So
beautiful.
yeah. So we will find a way to invite you for a third time. Definitely. So of course, this interview will be about Native American art in Arizona. And the first thing that I would like to ask you is, when I read your book, what I found surprising is that art for the one you studied for this book is actually making useful objects. It's not art for the sake of art. It's like silversmithing or weaving, but making useful objects. Were you surprised as well? What do you think?
Yes, I think that was one of the biggest shifts in how I understood art, is really that art isn't just for its own sake to be hung on a wall and never touched, but it's something that's to be used. And art is really a way of life. It's important to create beautiful objects, to use them, to walk with them, to celebrate culture and spirituality through the beautiful ornamentation, the beautiful necklaces. It's a really important component of the culture, is creating these objects that contain stories that are passed down through the ancestors. And the act of actually making the artwork too is a big part of the family lines.
You met many of those artists and you tell their stories in your book. What struck you most about them as people?
Leo, I was thinking about this actually this morning. You inspired me to reread my book to make sure I was prepared for this interview. And I was rereading stories and remembering interviews like with Verma Nesquatiwa. She's a jeweler on the Hopi, who lives in the Hopi reservation, who's the niece of Charles Lolema, one of the most famous Native American jewelers of all time. And, I just remembered how kind her heart was and how much she trusted me. I'm an outsider. I'm not from Arizona. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. I moved here and studied art for a very long time. And just finally, in my 30s, got to be introduced to Native American art, and especially in Arizona, and how special it was. And so I think what stood out for me is that people trusted me and I trusted them, and created beautiful just connections.
I think that Navajo is very popular. It's a very popular tribe, and it's also a very common word for Italians. While Hopi is not that common, and to be honest with you, I didn't know what Hopi was before reading your book, and I found out it was a different tribe. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on who the Hopi people are?
Sure. So like you, I had heard of Navajo. I'd heard of Navajo rugs. I'd heard of Navajo bread, is popular in Phoenix when I first moved here. But Hopi was something, a tribe that I learned when I first joined the docent program, a year-long program at the Native American Museum here in Phoenix, Arizona, called the Herd Museum. And what I learned was that the Hopi, they've been in this area for thousands of years. They really survived because they pushed back to actually Spanish colonialists. And they moved to the tops of these three mesas, which are basically like these huge cliffs overlooking a huge valley. And that's how they survived, and they continued generation for generation. And so I learned about the Hopi people. I learned of how their artwork is different than their neighboring tribe artwork. I learned of their history of the friction with the Navajo tribe too, with fighting over land as well. It lasted for a while. So learning about Hopi is much different than learning about Navajo art. Though the people live next to each other, they're neighbors. And some of them actually have shared lineage. They may be Navajo and Hopi.
As far as art is concerned, how is Navajo art different from Hopi and the other way around?
Sure, I actually brought some objects. I brought some props for today's interview with you. And so this is a Kachina doll. A Kachina doll, this is Hopi art. So I talk about in the book a few of the different carvers. Manuel Chavarria is one of the artists, and carving Kachinas, or these Kachina dolls, is something that the uncles usually do in the family lines. They teach the boys. And the important part of the art making is really to say prayers, to be positive, because they believe that the energy goes into the object that you're making. Kachinas are ritual objects. Kachina dolls are ritual objects, but Kachinas are believed to be these spirits who come and visit the mesas twice a year. And they are really basically encourage children to have good behavior. One of the artists, Kevin Chavarria, said, they'll whip you if you don't have good behavior. So you have to make sure that you're living in line with the code. And another artist I brought, who's a Hopi basket maker. This is Roma Ramson's wife, who's a award-winning basket maker. A big part of the tools they make in both Navajo and Hopi is natural from the land. So actually, the art of basket making and weaving has been around, for centuries. And it could have been used, like you mentioned with your first question, utilitarian, to store corn kernels, to carry things, as they moved around. But really having these objects that contain a story, same thing, saying prayers, singing while making the baskets. And that was a traditional female role. Now today we'll see that things have changed a little bit. So Navajo weavings usually are made by women. I unfortunately don't have one to show you, but okay. One of the artists in the book, actually, Marla Cotoni, he creates them, and he's a man. So things are changing and adapting, and with contemporary times. But the biggest thing I wanted to just share is Navajo. I'll see often jewelry. Hopi will see jewelry too, but with Hopi art, we'll see the Kachina dolls. That's really something special to their art form.
And what kind of tools do these people use? Because I understood from your work, from your book, that they don't use anything electric, like they don't have drills or anything of the sort. They just use knives and hammers.
So yeah, so the traditional tools, or the kind of old traditional method, is using very simple tools, by hand. But there are, artists who use modern tools too. It's really kind of up to their style and their choice when making things like Kachina dolls. But other artists like Melanie Yazzie, she makes prints, she makes collages. She'll use lots of, contemporary artist tools. And that's, I think, one of the things to share with your listeners, is that a big part of what I learned through Navajo and Hopi art is the mission of the artist to expand consciousness that Native American is not something of the past. It's very much something of the present. While Native artists often celebrate and continue the art forms, they still adapt and change with the times. Okay,
so they do. They also have modern tools. You visited some of them in reservations, right? What are the most striking aspects of reservations? Because I have no clue. I've never been there, of course.
Yes. Well, when you come to Arizona, we'll have to see if we can take you to a reservation. I went for the first time as well, moving here with my father-in-law, Brett Schmitt, who drove me, and it was very different, Leo. It really did feel like a whole nother world in certain respects, with navigation, road signs, the type of dwellings that our people live in. So the hogan is a circular shaped dwelling that you'll see a Navajo reservation. And then in the Hopi areas, they have, they're high up on the cliffs. They have ladders to get, traditionally to get into spaces, but it's much different living wise. It's remote, so your cell phone might not always work. So it's sort of like it's definitely away from the city, but it's beautiful. It's incredible. It's powerful. When I was standing on one of the cliffs on the Hopi reservation at Verma's home, just looking out, I realized how small humans are in this vast world that we live in. I think something about the reservation is very respecting the land, living very closely to it, and honoring nature almost as a spiritual practice.
But not all natives live in reservations. Some of them live just
Right.
in the outside world. So how
Yeah.
is it possible? How come they well, let me rephrase it. Like, how is the life of a native different inside the reservation and outside?
Yes, so definitely. So some artists that I met, they lived in Phoenix, they live in Scottsdale. Jesse Mononge, who is a really well-known Navajo Hopi jeweler, he's one of the most well-known in the Phoenix area. Beautiful. He spent time in living in cities, being in the military, doing things that Americans often become involved with, going to college. And then going to the reservations was something that he started doing more and more as a teenager when he got to know his father more, spending time with his family. So oftentimes the artists that I met, and again, I don't want to make any blanket statements for everyone, but they lived in maybe a city area just to make a living, to make ends meet, to have education, to have career opportunity. And then they visit the reservations, and some have a goal of actually moving back one day to the reservation. So, again, Native Americans are contemporary times. They'll live here in Phoenix, they live on the reservation, some live in both places, but the reservation, the land, is something that's very sacred to the people.
I see. In your opinion, how integrated are these people with today's America, the artists you've met, for instance?
They're right here, next to us. And that's something that Manuel Marlowe shared with me, is that he went to college in the University of Arizona, and he had new friends from Wyoming. And he was the first Native American person that they had met. And they were just kind of surprised by knowing someone who was in college with them, who was taking the same painting classes as he was. And I think that that's something that I've learned, is especially in Arizona, where we have the largest reservation in all of the United States, where it's one of the most populous states with Native peoples, learning that it's something that it's identity people are proud of, and they're practicing every day, and they're sharing, and there's always space to learn. But yes, they're right here with us. Yeah.
So very integrated. Very much integrated.
Very integrated, yes, very much integrated. And some people who live on the reservations, that's an incredible experience too. And they also travel south from the reservation to Phoenix to visit, to go to art shows or see friends or family. And it's definitely, there's room to go back and forth. So it's not contained in a sense where you just have to make a decision and stay there forever. You can travel up for the weekend or travel, in between the border.
Well, I definitely recommend to my viewers to read your book, which is very, very interesting. Thanks for your time again. Thanks for your very
Thank you
precious
so much, Leo.
explanations. And yes, thanks for being with us again. So thanks everybody for watching this, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.